Ladies and gentlemen, at the time of recording this video, July 29th, 2023, Magnus Carlsen is the best chess player in the world, and he's widely regarded by many as the greatest chess player of all time. So when Magnus Carlsen teaches you something, you really should internalize it and try to put it to good use, which is the purpose of today's video. I will be sharing with you the Magnus Carlsen chess opening versus the Sicilian defense, and how I studied it, I learned it from him, and how I've used it to defeat grandmasters. Grandmaster is the highest title that you could achieve in chess. So me beating 4 grandmasters with a Magnus Carlsen specialized opening is going to be quite a sight. Now, the lore of this, of Magnus Carlsen Sicilian defense, is when he played it in 2018 versus Radoslav Wojtaszek, who is a Polish grandmaster. Magnus played knight to c3 versus the Sicilian defense, and his opponent played pawn here. Magnus took and brought out his queen early, volunteering it for an attack, then did this, put his bishop on this square, and castled queenside. In general, the point is to move the knight, move the pawn here, take, bring the queen back, and go to battle. And in that game, Magnus did exactly that. He played f3. A little bit later, he created an attack on his opponent on this side of the board, and he went on to win the game. Now, I took his opening, and I put it to good use. I played 4 grandmasters from all over the world, and I'm going to share the results of the Magnus Carlsen chess opening. Exactly the opening that he plays, exactly against grandmasters. Let's learn. So I played pawn to d4. I was playing Grandmaster Tran Minh from Vietnam. He took my pawn, and it's exactly the same position as Magnus had in that game, right? We go back to the opening that we just saw in his game against Wojtaszek. It's the queen on d2. It's the exact same opening position. So let's learn from how Magnus does it. g6 was played in this game. I put my bishop on b2. My opponent played knight f6, and we castled, and I went here. Now, the game plan here is black attacks you on the queen side. You try to attack over here. There are obviously some discrepancies. Sometimes black does it a certain way. Sometimes black plays a6, b5. Sometimes black moves the queen. Sometimes black moves the bishop. Blah, 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 blah. Right? He played a5. There's multiple ways of meeting this move, a5, trying to play a4 and open up the rook even at the cost of a pawn. The best move is bishop to b5, but in this game it was blitz. I just fired back with a4. It's okay to move my pawn in front of my king. I'm not allowing my opponent any progress, and now b5 is no longer a concern because I will just take it. But many people react to this by firmly planting their knight on the b4 square and basically saying, look, I'm going to attack you over here. And I played, okay, no problem, king to b1. Sliding over, getting off of this diagonal over here, potentially, covering some squares. My opponent played bishop e6 and rook to c8. So he's brought his forces to the queen side. Now it's time for me to put my knight into the center of the board to potentially get rid of the bishop to relieve the pressure. He goes knight d7, looking to reroute his knight into an attack and also open up the bishop. But that knight move retreats and removes a little bit of defense from the king. So now it's my time to strike with pawn to h4. This is exactly how Magnus drew it up. This is the whole point of the Magnus Carlsen Sicilian. You castle queenside, your bishop stays on this diagonal, safeguarding the center and your queenside knight, and now pawn to h4. If my opponent plays h5, unfortunately that doesn't stop much because g4 is very powerful. He can take. I have no plan to take back. I'm just gonna go here. And then if he takes, it's going to be bad news. Rook h5, queen g5, and it's just a monstrous attack. And you see the eval there, completely winning for white. So it's very bad news if you play h5, but I got news for you. It's also bad news if you allow h5. So the pawn is now knocking on the door. I'm going to be taking on g6 and opening up my rook. My opponent put his queen on b6 after spending 40 seconds. Look at his time usage, 40 seconds spent, and for good reason. It's a very unpleasant position. Now, at this point, I can already begin the demolition, but I was a little bit concerned with the queen here. I figured also I haven't moved my bishop, so I block the queen's vision. As you can see, that was a bad move, but it was only a bad move because of the ridiculous knight to d3, cutting my communication with my knight, and if I took, he can take here, and his attack is actually now equally strong. It's very difficult for me to do anything. He will happily trade off material with me, and then he's going to bring his rook, and I'm going to lose. So I should not have played bishop to b5. I should have kept my foot on the gas, but it's a learning experience. I should have taken and tried to attack him. But I did this, and he didn't realize how to strike, so now I went for g4. The idea of pawn to g4 is to join forces with my rook and bulldoze him on the h-file. Queen and rook versus a bishop playing defense, not going to be good enough. He took, I took, rook e8, take, and there's queen h2. And there is absolutely nothing that black can do. Look at my time advantage. This is a 3-minute blitz game. A 3-minute blitz game. And on move 20, queen h2, I have 2 minutes remaining, and he has 37 seconds, because his position is absolutely critical. He cannot defend against the attack. Pawn to h6, and now I could have galloped in with knight d5, which attacks the queen, but more importantly, bishop g7. He cannot go here, my bishop and knight defend, and after this, it's queen h6, and it's game over in a couple of moves. But I was a little bit nervous. I was playing a grandmaster. I decided queen to d2. What am I famous for, my friends? I'm famous for one thing, and that one thing is sacrificing the rook, bulldozing the king's position, trying to get my queen in there if he takes. He declines, but it doesn't matter. The rook drops back, defending. G5, F4, it's an avalanche. My rook is not just playing offense, it's also playing defense, and my opponent in this position ran out of steam. Everything is guarding everything else. The knight guards the pawn guards the knight, the knights guard each other, the bishop guards the knight, the rook guards the knight, and he ran out of steam in this position. And in this game, according to Game Review, I had a very, very nice performance, and I did it purely because of the Magnus Carlsen Sicilian. Played an 84% accurate game, and I was estimated elo 2850. Now, you'll notice the Magnus Carlsen Sicilian works against d6, but in this video, I'm going to share with you that it doesn't just have to be d6. Here's another game that I played against a Croatian grandmaster, and he played e6. The incredible thing is you can apply this to your repertoire everywhere. You just have to play it slightly differently. You cannot always play the same way. For example, here, against pawn to e6, it's better to do this. It's actually better to block your bishop because your bishop is going to go here, because you're trying to fight for the dark squares. And if you go queen d2, it's considered not as good, because after queen d2, the bishop is coming here, right? We don't want that. So, queen to d3, a6, bishop f4. So I play this in a slightly different way, but it's still inspired by the Magnus Carlsen Sicilian. Knight to c3, queen d4, and queen back. He goes here, I castle, he develops the bishop. And it's a very, very complicated position. We castle on opposite sides. What happened in the last game? f3, g4, h4, more of the same. Here it is. That is a declaration of hostility against my opponent. I want to play h5, I want to play f3, g4, g5. He's going to play here, he's going to play here. It's going to be very uncompromising stuff. Queen a5, and now I could have just played h5, but I decided, you know what, he's a little bit congested there. What's he going to do with the bishop? He dropped out of my position, and my attack continued. Now, a very big decision. He could play h6, but if he plays h6, I have many positions where I could potentially get to the g5 square and trade that pawn. So he decides he's not going to play h6. He's going to go here. But a couple moves later, I play h6, and now he's going to have to weaken his position. So he plays g6. But my friends, queen to g3 was not just an attack on the king. Look at this incredible geometry. I teamed up with my bishop to sneak in right there, to go like this, and bishop c7. That is why you play on the dark squares. That is why in the other Sicilian, you put your bishop here. But in this Sicilian, because of the opening setup and the Swiss cheese of dark squares, queen g3 infiltrates, bishop c7, and I don't have to checkmate him, but I win a rook for a bishop, and now I'm winning after 15 moves against yet another grandmaster. Now, the game's not over, and you're going to see in this game, he fights back. That's the nature of the game. I played e5, I shoved his knight backwards, and I played f4, but that gave him time to play b5, and I talked about this already. He's going to play b5. Rook for a bishop is a good advantage, but your rooks are endgame pieces, and right now this rook's presence is not felt. This bishop's presence is about to be felt. So I played knight a2, dropping out of the attack. He played a5, and I played rook h3, which was actually more of a defensive move because I'm trying to trade his queen. With no queens, I'm probably not going to get checkmated. He goes back to e7. With no pieces on the board, I'm probably not going to get checkmated. He could have played bishop to b6 first, but he did it like this, and I dropped back, and I played king b1, and now I'm consolidating. I've traded a couple of pieces. The pawn here is a thorn. His king is stuck on the back rank, and in all endgames, these pawns could be loose, and this pawn is an asset for me. Rook is going to rotate over. He tries to continue building up an attack, but now the bishop infiltrates. Same exact bishop move, by the way. You'll remember in the last game, I played bishop to b5 to block some of the queen side. We have the same exact square, same exact piece. Knight b3, and now a4, and I seal the position. So now there is going to be no water getting into the position. There's not going to be a flood in my roof or in my basement walls. Knight to c4, I just go here. The position is blocked, and the rook is now going to be felt. Rook c1, c3, take, and I'm going to break through on the c-file. Also, this is a very nice position. None of his pawns can move. Literally, I've frozen the pawn structure, which is a massive, massive deal here. Very different type of game than last time, but a different flavor of the Magnus Sicilian. Rook to c8, I play g4 because you never know if I'm gonna try to play f5, and now my opponent played knight to e3. That was a rush decision, 15 seconds on the clock. He was hoping for queen takes and queen to c2, but unfortunately, I just took like this. He took, I'm completely defended, rook to c4, I could have even probably taken, but I force a queen trade, and after 35 moves, and the infiltration threatened rook c7, he resigned. None of his pieces were able to get active, and he didn't move any of his pawns since I played h6. So you'll notice in this game, he managed to develop his pieces, came back, I did this, and he never moved those pawns again. I locked the position, I outmaneuvered, I plugged the attack with knight c1, bishop b5, knight b3, a4, and I won on the dark squares, and with the infiltration early, queen to g3 and bishop to c7. Very different type of Magnus opening, but, right? It's not exactly the Magnus Sicilian, but it just shows you how despite the different variation and the different ideas, it's a similar type of starting idea from the opening. And there's more. Here's a game that I played against another person. This person closed their account, okay? This person closed their account. They decided to log off after this game was played. I actually have a clip of this game somewhere. This was a very different type of game. In this game, my opponent played knight c6. So I wasn't able to play pawn to d4. So it's just a slightly different version, but now we play bishop to b5. Okay, we can't play against e6 and d6, but now we play bishop b5. And I've had games where my opponents play like this. And I take, and then I play against the doubled pawns. I trade off my light squared bishop. I play d3. I've also won a couple of nice games like that, but none against 2,900 level grandmasters. So I decided to include this game because, right, my opponent went here, knight f3. They kicked out my bishop. And this was a very, very, very crazy game. My opponent got really hostile with me early with pawn to b5. That's not a very common move, but neither is bishop c4. Going back to d3 is a little bit more common, so you get out of the way here. In this game, I decided to attack my opponent's rook and rook a7, and here I went a little bit crazy. This is not recommended. I do not condone my actions in this game, but it was still fun to sometimes be very aggressive in the opening. I played knight takes d4, pawn takes d4, and rather than retreating, I played bishop takes f7 check. Now, what I had calculated here was king takes, queen check. His king is not going to go up. He's going to block. I'm going to give another check, and then I'm going to take the pawn attacking that rook and that rook. All of that is right. Everything. He takes, I give a check. If he walks up, it's mate. If he walks up, it's mate in 2. I just send him back to f6. But if he goes here, I play queen d5 check. Now he's going to block because he doesn't want to go here and get fork, right? Everything I said was correct. He goes here, I go here. Now it's a fork. What I had failed to realize during the game was I actually cannot take that rook. So I miscalculated. I thought he would move his rook and then takes and everything, but he can actually trap my queen by defending his rook. And if I take, he can go here. And suddenly, this is a huge threat because I can't take his queen because it moved. So I would have to play this, bishop g7, counterattack the queen. He would go here. I would take attacking the queen. He would go here, and now my queen is trapped. So I didn't see that. I saw enough, but guess what? He didn't see it either. So I took his rook. So from a Magnus Sicilian, I sacked my bishop, lured his king out, checked him again, and forked his rooks. But I failed to realize that despite everything I calculated being correct, my queen is going to get trapped. And we don't like that very much. So, but he also didn't see, played knight f6, I castled, and now I'm simply winning after 12 moves. because of the favorite opening, right? I'm playing the Magnus Sicilian, looking for pawn to d4. If I don't get it, I do it in a very non-compromising way. He could take my bishop, I'll take, and then I'll play pawn to d4. But the way my opponent did it, it allowed me to create this ridiculous board geometry and swoop in for a rook, castle quickly. And now it's just about converting the position. So I've got to take the center and I've got to develop all my pieces and I have to simplify. He played rook to f8, trying to castle by hand and get the king to safety. I played pawn to d3. And just like in the game that I just played, right? Look at how the patterns overlap. Dark squares, dark squares. What do? Bring out my bishop. Because I'm ready to go bishop c7 and bishop d6. The same middle game concepts apply in multiple games. He plays d5. I played, this is a very nasty move to deal with. He attacks my queen and I centralize. And my opponent just resigned in this position. +3, but decided to resign because there's a lot of pressure. You can't escape. There's pressure here. I'm going to play a4 on the next move. There's just absolutely nothing you can do. Absolutely nothing you can do. I'm going to play pawn to a4, and rather than even proceed with the game, my opponent realized my bishop's dead. These pieces are going to get traded. f4, f5, a4 takes, rook e1, rook e3, rook f3. Too much, 17 moves, white wins with this other variation. Remember I told you there's going to be a fourth game? Well, there is. I played yet another Grandmaster. Pawn to e4, pawn to c5. It's a Grandmaster from Lithuania. This is very strong, 2850 level. I played knight c3. We've seen d6, we've seen e6, we've seen knight c6. People have played g6 against me. a6. It's also very uncompromising Sicilian. This is one of the nicest games I played in this video. Obviously, the very first game that I played, the pure Magnus Sicilian with this and getting all of these ideas on the board, f3. Like, this was a fantastic game. I was very proud of this game. But this was also a very nice game. It was a Title Tuesday game. And again, we do the exact same thing. Okay, now against this one in particular, okay, against this one, we put our queen here. Can we play queen to d2 and play it like a Magnus Sicilian? Yes. There are slight differences though. Slight differences, black never played d6. So black could play e6, you see? And remember I told you how here, e6, queen d2 is bad? It all overlaps. You learn from one game. You go, oh, he never committed his d-pawn, so I'm going to put my queen here. And now this is the idea. When he plays pawn to g6, okay, trying to go here, I'm going to fight his bishop on this diagonal. Not the Magnus Carlsen Sicilian way, but like this. Bishop d2, castles, knight to d5, and bishop c3. You have to understand the different ways of playing against the different setups. Okay, so in this video, we've covered everything. We've covered d6, we've covered where to drop back the queen. Against e6, we cover where to drop back the queen. Against knight c6, we cover bishop to b5, and sometimes you take. If they go here, you play knight f3, and you try to develop. And then versus the a6 Sicilian, this is what you do, bishop c3. And the general idea here is that you are happy to make trades. For example, black can castle. You'll play something like king to b1 or bishop to e2 and try to play for h4, but you don't mind making some trades here, and then you try to create some sort of attack. Now, in the game, my opponent took my knight, hitting my queen. I took with a pawn. If bishop takes, that's obviously very bad for the position over there. My opponent played knight e5. If I play this, it looks like I'm winning the knight, but I'm not. He attacks me here. I come back, and he can always go here or take and try to block. So I did this. Now his knight can't go to g4. And now I'm going to go here. So he castled. I kicked out his knight. He did this, and I removed the bishop. So now my opponent's king has no defenders. So what do? g4. Pure, exact game plan that I have tried to implement in every single one of these games. Every single one of these games. I have castled queenside. I have tried my best, except this one, where I castled kingside, but it was a very different position. So my opponent plays knight f6. Okay, now, what do? Knight f3, bishop d3, king b1. I decide I'm going to go g5. Because the knight cannot actually stop me. Because I will go here. I'm going to strip the defense away and play knight e2, knight g3, and just keep going. So my opponent realizes that and has to go here. I got news for you. That's not stopping my attack. He hasn't made any progress. I played g4. He could have He probably should have played faster on the queen side, but he went here. Now he's pushed back, and here comes h4. He just can't stop me. The attack is roaring forward. Pawn to h4. Now, if he tries to play something like h5, of course I gotta take. I cannot allow myself to be blockaded. Something like this would be a disaster. I have no attack now. I mean, I'm still trying, and maybe I'll get there in the end. But if he plays h5 or h6, I'm gonna take. He plays f6, I'm gonna try to get in on the light squares. I'm gonna play h5, right? So what does he do? Bishop g4. Yeah, that stops me from playing h5, but what's my new target? Very simple move. Bishop e2. What's he gonna do, right? So in this position, he plays queen d7. His queen is coming to defend the king. The queen is not equipped to play defense. The queen should not be playing defense. I can take, and I'll just go here. You could take. Guess what I'm gonna do? Move my knight, move my rook. The queen should not be playing defense because both my rooks and my pawns are just coming straight down the board. My king is safe and sound over here in the vacation home. Nothing to be done. Let's go back. What do? I can take. I just play h5. He never stopped my attack. Same exact thing as in this game. In game number 1, I played h5, and I'm just knocking on the door. Just knocking on the door. Anybody home? h5, right? So what's he do? Well, what does he do? If he goes here, he's going to lose a lot of protection over here, and I can play f5 in the future. So he decides it's time to create a counterattack. It's too late. I take. My attack is way faster. He has to acknowledge me. Now my rook is taking away all the squares. Now I give a check. Why do I give a check now? Options for black. Here, en passant, I win the queen. f6, I take and I keep attacking. King goes to f8, I infiltrate on h8 or h7. King f8, rook h7 is vicious. So, what does he play? f6. What do? I don't rush. Knight f3. Why? This is weak. I'm bringing my rook. And the best part about the reason why the attack works for white is because he has no counterplay. At all times during my attack, I'm thinking, can he do anything to me? No. 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 So what does he do? Runs with his king. Which piece have I not moved yet? My rook. I'm threatening this. My knight is going to come in. Rook g4, rook h4, all of this good stuff. Yeah, look at him. He's creating some counterplay. Rook c2. So what do? Pawn to c3. That's the end of the counterplay. He's out of options. Knight h4, pawn takes, rook h7, rook h8, bishop to d3 to remove the bishop. He plays here, I take to open up my second rook, and now it's just about breaking down the defenses. Knight to h4, he goes here, and I play bishop to f3. Now, technically the computer found something more violent, but it doesn't matter. I take on g6, take, queen here. Very simple and straightforward. Rook to g1. Rook to g1 was not the best move. He could have deflected my rook away. According to the computer, I should have played a rook g1, but he resigned in this position because he didn't see a way to defend his knight. If he plays knight e7, queen f6, rook f6, it all leads to checkmate in 2 moves. Ladder mate in the center of the board. A completely ridiculous attack. Look at, conducted from start to finish. From the opening, we put our bishop on d2, correct gameplay, put the knight in the center, trade off for the dark squared bishop like this, prevent his knight from moving forward, and the second we had a chance, g4, g5, h4, remove the bishop, push the pawn, take, give a check, develop, bring the rook, defend against the threat, chop it down, hit the bishop and the pawn, defend against the bishop, knight to g6, just a full-on avalanche. And this happened in multiple games. The same thing over here. Prevent my opponent from getting what he wants. Centralize my knight. h4, h5, stop the attack. g4, chop it down. Queen h2, sack the rook infiltrating. This is all coming from the Magnus Carlsen Sicilian. And this was kind of a masterclass, well, I would like to call it one, maybe you have other opinions, of how to learn chess openings from the greats. Magnus Carlsen in particular taught me how to play this. I studied some of his games and I did my own research. I analyzed some games from other grandmasters that have tried to play it versus certain setups. And now with e4, c5, knight c3, and pawn to d4, I'm winning something like 65, 70% of my games, which is a crazy, crazy scoreline. So I have been dominating ever since studying the Magnus Carlsen Sicilian, and this approach applies to any opening that you'd like to learn that some famous grandmasters play. It could be the French defense, the Benoni, Nimso-Indian. It could be classical games. It could be modern games. This was the Magnus Carlsen Sicilian. This was how Magnus taught me how to play an opening. And I'm happy I could share it for you, with you. I'll see you in the next video. Get out of here.